Alright. So the first drug that I'm going to be looking at is mescaline. So it's a serotonergic hallucinogen, and it has a trip that lasts around 8 to 10 hours, and it acts a lot like psilocybin. So what is it? Mescaline is the active ingredient of a number of psychedelic cacti, including peyote, which is seen here, and it's been used for hundreds of years in religious rituals and ceremonies, and it acts as a 5-HT2A2C agonist. So, on top of the hallucinogenic effects, the emotional effects include euphoria, relaxation, increased intensity of emotions, and the trip kind of feels like a dreamlike state with a slowed passage of time, and the spiritual experiences for the religious aspect. However, it is a serotonergic hallucinogen, so there's a possibility for a bad trip, which could be affected by mood, personality, surroundings, and your expectations of the trip. And the negative effects can include anxiety and fear, psychosis, panic, paranoia, and the ability to distinguish between reality and fantasy. And stuff like this, or the fear that you're going mad, could be especially bad for since it's such a long trip. And it acts on the medial temporal lobe and the amygdala, which are responsible for self-awareness, cognitive function, memory, and emotional processing. And then the second drug I'm looking at is ayahuasca or DMT. So ayahuasca produces a dreamlike trip with visions and memories. It's also been used for hundreds of years for religious rituals. So N,N-dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, is the psychoactive component, and this plant, Psychotria viridis, is where it comes from. And ayahuasca tea is made from combining this with monoamine oxidase inhibitor to make it orally active. Otherwise, it doesn't have any effect if you ingest it. And DMT can be synthesized as well. When it's smoked, the trip usually lasts around 20 minutes, whereas if you have ayahuasca tea, it can last 2 to 6 hours. So it shows agonist activity at the 5-HT2A and 1A receptors, and it's a pretty short, like I said, but very intense trip. This is the most intense hallucinogenic drug. So what are the emotional effects? First of all, it increases neural activity in the limbic system, in the medial temporal lobe, which again is responsible for processing memories and emotions, and it decreases neural activity in the default mode network, which is really interesting because increased activity in the default mode network is responsible for rumination that you would see in depression and anxiety. So this is a good thing that it decreases it. So you end up in a meditative state during this trip, where you're in a profoundly altered state of awareness. And generally it increases mindfulness, introspection, and sense of self. This can last for months after the trip is over, which is called the afterglow period, and it enhances community-minded approaches rather than selfishness. A study of long-term use was looking at members who used it religiously, who had used it for at least 10 years on a regular basis, compared with religious controls. And users scored significantly lower in depression, anxiety, paranoid ideation, and hostility, and a number of other psychometric factors. And they scored significantly higher in self-transcendence, self-acceptance, and psychosocial bonds. And finally, it is used as a trial drug to treat depression and addiction in treatment-resistant patients. So this ties into the mindfulness and introspection during the afterglow period. So that's a really good time to use these therapy strategies. And these are the references.